The Pod Barber. Coming up on today's show.
It's a key situation here where we're either going to let the Empire reign and rule over us, or we're going to stand up and fight.
Revolution,
we're going to rebel. So we knew it was a key scene, and I didn't know how key the character would be until you go onto this thing called Wikipedia, which is essentially naming every single character, reference,
moment,
weapon,
star, galaxy,
everything.
planet,
it's incredible,
sun.
And you put in like the Red Squadron list with Luke Skywalker and etc. And then you just see my characters in there with those guys from the original.
And your pictures.
Oh, yeah. And it's just bizarre because to hundreds of thousands of people,
millions,
they just care so much about the story. But I love how they love it, and I love how they get lost in it.
You're listening to The Pod Barber. I'm championing the chat, proving conversation is the cure to better mental health and well-being. Meet my guests from all walks of life, showing vulnerability and sharing wisdom. Sit in on my chats and be part of reality entertainment. Join the Pod Barber tribe. Subscribe, share and like people. Feel the sonic positivity we're pumping right at you. You, my friends, are not alone. Who's next, please? Well, I'll tell you who. Riding shotgun, my co-pilot for today's pod is none other than Benjamin Hartley, a.k.a. Harb Binli, X-Wing fighter pilot from the Star Wars movie Rogue One. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, this rebel fighter's mission was dropping TIE fighters, a talented and tenacious pilot, part of the Galactic Civil War. Before his adventures in space, he was fighting and flying here on Earth. A former Navy officer and helicopter pilot for 16 years with tons of experience. Later bringing his aviation expertise to film and featuring in Star Wars in the cockpit of the iconic X-Wing was his childhood dream come true. Navigating the Navy into Hollywood, one of Ben's first gigs was advising Brad Pitt not only on his styling and image, but also his aviation skills during the World War Z film. MFS casting agency was established, giving military skillmanship to many big-budget movies and opportunities for servicemen to be part of Hollywood. As a kid, Ben grew up everywhere, travelling with the family's work. Not one to lay down roots, he's learned from so many cultures and has lived well. Now working in the heart of Cambridge for an incubator firm supporting startups and entrepreneurs, his excitement for another chapter of innovation blossoms. Another diverse dude, part of this fast-growing, richly talented community, helping see Saffron Walden become dubbed Safrancisco. So stop scrolling, start listening to the one with Benjamin Hartley. Welcome to the show, man.
That was brilliant. I love that. That was a great intro. And by the way, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. I've been following you, stalking you, tracking you down.
As I said, it's great to be here, and it's great to be part of the podcast, which I've listened to and is doing incredibly well. So, firstly, well done.
Thank you very much indeed, man. It's a pleasure. How's things going for you right now?
Good. Yeah, very, very good. As you mentioned, I'm currently in Cambridge as head of IdeaSpace, this incubator for startups. So, surrounded by a lot of very, very bright people who can, within a sentence or two, make you feel incredibly... I don't want to say stupid, maybe that's the word. No, just because they're in very technical fields, a lot of them, very highly specialised in their fields and coming up with some amazing concepts for their high-impact ventures in the startup world. So, yeah, it's very exciting.
I have these kind of dudes coming in the shop and cutting their hair, and if you sort of tune in a little bit, you can start to get snippets, can't you, and just realise how exciting and how much Mindspace is being put on the future solution finding. It's really exciting. It's really encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. As you said, lots of bright minds, and the majority of them are for the betterment of the world, for humanity and the environment. So it's incredibly important, but you do get a sense that everyone's working for that common goal. I think there's a misnomer of startups. You think of a sort of typical startup and it's all about these big unicorn companies, your Ubers and Facebooks and Twitters and etc. But you're talking here about academics coming out of universities, spin-outs, and it's in trying to cure cancer and feed the population and reduce the amount of carbon dioxide we put in the atmosphere. Or it's all working, as I said, towards common goal, and it does feel good.
I love chatting to those guys, and you're getting to do it all the time. You have done some pretty cool shit, like becoming immortalised in the greatest movie series of all time, arguably. But let's kick off and tell us a little bit about the adventure of your childhood.
Right. I was fortunate enough to travel a lot with my family. My Dad worked overseas, or when I was 6 months old, moved to Morocco. So we were there for a few years, and then in Nairobi in Kenya. Growing up there was fantastic. I mean, you can imagine up to the age of sort of 9 or 10 years old, you're in a completely different culture. You're immersed in that world, and it opens your eyes, I think. And after being back in the UK for a couple of years, we were off in Mexico for a number of years as well, which fantastic experience. Absolutely loved Mexico. And then subsequently, after we were back in the UK again, they went off to Istanbul about the same time as I went to university. And Ankara after that. So Istanbul for a couple of years and then Ankara for a couple before finally coming back to the UK. Obviously hadn't seen enough of the world because I ended up joining the Navy, as you said later on, to go and see the world. But I was very fortunate, and I think it certainly gives you a different perspective. Whilst you're immersed in the culture, you're still part of an expat community. So I'm not going to lie and say that you're completely removed from...
Living with the Berbers in the mountains and
exactly.
harvesting goats. And...
You're seeing a lot, for sure. And I think as a young child, it's a great opportunity to see as much and experience as much as we did as kids.
It's a very fortunate exposure, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it obviously makes sense, that, doesn't it? That early exposure to anything just drops barriers, and, you don't have preconceived ideas about other cultures if you're already immersed in it. The more multicultural the world becomes and we become, the better. We're all the better for it.
Well, you sort of need to lose the word diversity and it just inclusivity, shouldn't it? It's not about diversity, it's about inclusivity. Everyone should be welcome and have opportunities.
Absolutely right.
We need to fight hard for that. All your, that family life growing up as you did, those early experiences, how did that shape that direction that you took?
I think what it did is just prepare me to take an opportunity when it's presented to you, I think. So when you're open and ready for change, i.e. if you're not tied to a location or a place or a set of friends or a house or a home or village or town or whatever, when you don't have that tie, if an opportunity comes that involves change, you can just take it without question or without thought. So I think that it's probably shaped me most in that sense. My life subsequently has just been a series of opportunities taken rather than just being dictated to by your environment. All in all, I just feel really fortunate. I feel really fortunate to have had that, and whatever the downsides to it, the upsides far outweighs them.
How did you get into flying helicopters?
It's a good question. Early on, I think it was Empire Strikes Back. And there was something about the flying side of things that really appealed. And then years later, I finished university. I did a graduate job in recruitment for not very long and learnt very quickly that 9-to-5 office job was absolutely not for me. So I went back to university to do music production because I played in bands, playing lots of live gigs and just loved it. Did some studio work. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll go back to that because that's what I love doing. And I was just started working in a small studio up in Shropshire. And I saw this helicopter in a window. Turned out to be a recruiting office. Big fancy shot of this helicopter taking off a ship. And I just thought, God, that looks cool.
Yeah, man.
So I literally just walked in there and said, what do I have to do to...
Yeah, can I do that?
Yeah, well, I want to do that. What do I have to do that? And I think it was some chief petty officer of retirement age. I think his first reaction was along the lines of, that's a bit hard. Have you thought about maybe being driving a ship? And, as soon as someone is saying to you, that might be a bit hard for you, you're just like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, hold on, pal.
Yeah, hold on, pal. And it was just a series of interviews. I think they said, oh, look, come back, we'll book you in for an interview with someone. And then you get to that. And then there's a sort of another challenge ahead of you, which is, well, you have to pass these flight aptitude tests before you can progress to the next thing. Just like, okay, well, sign me up for that. I want to do that. That's a kind of spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination type test that you do. You got to Cramwell, or it was at the time. And came back and I luckily scored quite highly in both navigator and a pilot thing. And again, they were trying to steer me down another route, I guess, saying, well, have you thought about the observer side or navigator? You scored quite well in that. I was like, no, I just want to fly the thing off the ship like the poster.
Yeah, like the bit I told you earlier.
Yeah. And anyway, it's just a sort of sequence of events that about 8 months after I first saw the poster in the window, I'm at Dartmouth Naval College. You have this 2 or 3 day interview process thing as well that's quite tough to get through. And I'm running around Dartmouth This is Britannia Royal Naval College, Dartmouth, BRNT Dartmouth, with a rucksack on my back at 5 a.m, getting shouted at, and so from being foot up on a mixing desk to running around Dartmouth, waiting to start my flying training. So it was great, but that's kind of how it happened.
That's how it happened. Yeah. So I love the fact that it was Star Wars inspired. I just think that's the beauty of the whole thing.
Yeah, it definitely. Something was in my head from that point on, and obviously all the other films, but you just look at the X-Wings all being sort of scrambled in the various films, especially A New Hope, at the end. It's kind of cool, isn't it?
Oh man, it's more than kind of cool, yeah.
Funny enough I suppose it went full circle, didn't it, with the whole Star Wars bit at the end, but...
Well, maybe it's not the end anyway. Tell us a bit about, I know that you probably signed to years of secrecy and all of that, but we won't tell anyone. So can you tell us some of your missions, some of the stuff that you were getting up to as a naval helicopter pilot?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I was flying to start with Sea King helicopters, and we were initially off aircraft carriers where you'd fly up well ahead of the ship and you'd have this kind of radar and you're just helping steer other aircraft and jets and other helicopters, and also keeping a track of other ships in the region, sort of thing. And then I converted to Merlin helicopters, which at the time was an anti-submarine warfare helicopter. So it has a sonar that you can release out the bottom of it, or sonar buoys that can sit in the water and track submarines. And then the role sort of changed into, again, maritime patrol. So you have a small frigate, which can be off somewhere in the middle of the ocean on its own, so not part of a bigger group of ships. And there was a lot of tracking vessels of interest.
Mm-hmm. Anti-terror missions.
There was elements of that, yes. There's anti-piracy. We did a lot of work off the south of Yemen and into the Gulf of Oman. There's a lot of people smuggling, which is one of the main things that I took part in, yeah.
Cool. How many people did you smuggle? Oh, sorry, mate. Wrong question.
We managed to stop lots of illegals being smuggled.
Yeah, no, it's important. Actually, that's such an important role of maritime security, is helping the oppressed people. We put birds up in the sky of all description and helicopters in your story, but without that, there are so many horrible people just abusing vulnerable people everywhere, aren't there? So
yeah, drugs, weapons, people being smuggled all over the world, and there's lots that the Navy does, obviously, to stop that. Most of the majority of it's unreported, but that's what's happening. Mostly on a day-to-day basis. That's the sort of work that the Navy's doing. So
full respect to them. They spend a lot of time away from the family. You're on a boat. Was that your experience of it in your role?
Do you know,
or could you come in and out because you've got a helicopter? You can just go, I'm just going to go back to the mainland now.
Sort of, actually. When the ship leaves, if it left Portsmouth or something, the ship's company's been there for a few days on the ship, getting ready to go, and then it sails off to sea. And at the very last minute, you basically leave it for as late as you can with the ship disappearing off to the ocean before you fly to catch up the ship and land on it. So you're there for the minimum amount of time possible. Ship's company, they didn't always like that idea that you'd pitch up, but hey.
It's a tough ship.
Yeah, it is tough ship. Yes, when you're aircrew, it's a tough ship for them. Being on a ship in the middle of the ocean, it's a strange environment to be in. You've got this working village, this sort of town, this community of people all working together, mostly just to try and keep each other alive, i.e. don't catch fire, don't run out of food, don't crash and sink, don't, etc. But the sense of teamwork, being on a ship in the middle of the ocean, you really do respect every person who's working with you and alongside you. And the sense of camaraderie, respecting the fact that everyone in the team is contributing. It might seem that one's contribution is far less than someone else's. A couple of those people out and the thing doesn't function. So taught me a lot about teamwork. Everyone's got to pull away.
Fundamentally, man, that's what we all need to do wherever you work, whatever you do. Like, drop your ego. Doesn't matter what level you are. It's great to sort of really celebrate every single person's role. Without looking at the role. We are all just one, and we need to work together, don't we? Bosh, there you go. There's one message from Ben jamming as he's jamming Hartley. I teased myself up with that because I put it in there, didn't I? I'm an idiot. So I'll admit it. There's a lot of pressure on pilots. Things fall out of the sky. Tell me about any of the situations you found yourself in or a witness to. Or
in terms of actual things going wrong, I've had an engine failure early on in a Sea King. Yeah, that was over the sea and managed to dive away, and you can actually fly on one engine. You need a lot of speed, and we didn't have a lot of speed at the time, so you have to sort of dive towards the sea to pick up airspeed, which is counterintuitive. Obviously, you want to not fly down towards the sea when you've got an emergency. But it's funny, actually, things like that. When you train for dangerous scenarios or a scenario like that, that's not necessarily stressful. You know, your preparedness for something isn't the stressful part. It's the underlying stress or responsibility that you feel. You know, there's lots in the armed forces or people working, you know, there'll be firefighters or NHS staff or just working in a company. Those people who bear responsibility for others, there's a lot of stress that goes unnoticed, and especially in those positions of power or responsibility. There's a perception that things are being dealt with because you need to show that. As aircrew, you can't look like you're not dealing with it very well. So there's lots of people that I'd work with who really feeling it but not showing it. So I think it's important for people to be very open. And there's a culture, sort of non-blame culture of we need to talk about what went wrong and who's made a mistake to be able to come back and land on and say, I screwed up. Okay, this is how I screwed up. And go through the whole sequence of events from you. Night before, not enough sleep, didn't have enough food, I was late, I didn't get my briefing done properly, to go through all of the things that might have affected your decision-making at the time if it was a decision that was made that instigated the problem or meant that you didn't react in the right way. But having an honest and open culture, a blame-free culture, helps, the learning experience from that mistake so it doesn't happen again, but also to lift this level of stress that you're under. And I think in today's culture, there are lots of people who are afraid of this blame that'll happen. I sense that people aren't as willing to kind of put their hand up and say I screwed up because, everyone's just under a constant microscope.
Society needs to start to do that more often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's purging that container of your stress container. Yeah. If you can empty the tap a little bit, that's where you can. But you made a great point of saying, well, there is an egotistical thing about owning your own story. And if you don't double down on your failures, that you minimise the opportunity of success. It's good to fail. It's good to make mistakes. That's the learning process. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, totally. And that it's very difficult to have the conversation if people are afraid to speak openly. We need to have that kind of open crew room environment where people are talking about their errors and mistakes without being pulled apart. You need to have conversation. And this podcast is very much about conversations, about letting people talk, or not letting people talk, but encouraging them to talk. And then you have to listen. That's how a conversation works. There's the talking and the listening. Yeah, conversation, of course, is the cure.
Do you think these kids now have lost the art of talking and listening because we've not shown them? Do you think they're a civic duty, like some format of sort of national service or some format of group?
I think it is useful, and it doesn't matter whether it's a residential construction project that someone does for 6 months and has to wake up early. More just that you can devolve yourself of responsibility by being just told what to do. And sometimes that's actually really quite liberating. Fresh air, early mornings, hard graft, all of these things, I think, it's not the national service like some great military boot camp training that necessarily people need to go through, but they need to be tested physically, mentally, in a place where the responsibility is lifted off them, and they're just like, survival is like that. Survival training is very much like that. Yeah, you get through it and you just respect yourself a little bit more, and you also believe in yourself and your ability to overcome adversity, even if it's a real small way. I think we have lost that, for sure, that kids could do with that.
Academic functional fitness, because it's the life's work that you need. You shouldn't just associate something of learning from that pipeline draconian style schooling that we have. You could be liberated and just be told that actually you need to get up, you need to go outside, you need to get some fresh air, you need to learn this, you need to talk, you need to map read, you need to
risk, we are risk averse. And I think that's a major problem in children specifically nowadays. Creating risk averse people means that we don't have innovators. We don't need to be picking winners. We need to be letting losers into the game and let them learn through losing. Yeah.
Right. Let's work out exactly how you transition from being a Navy pilot into a Hollywood legend. I'm going to build it up a little bit, and then I'm going to regress that slightly and say, talk to me how you initially styled Brad Pitt.
Well, no, so I didn't style Brad Pitt, as you very well know. I didn't style.
I regressed from the other bit. I'm not accepting that.
Yeah,
well,
okay.
You know you did.
So I was in the last few years of my Navy career, so I knew that I was leaving. I'd produced a short film, in fact, a feature-length film, with a friend of mine. At the same time, my friend, a very good friend and colleague, Andrew Buckley, had left the Royal Marines. He was a Royal Marine and he became a location manager. And I had the phone call from him out of the blue about trying to help secure they needed a ship for this film. I gave some advice where to find this ship. We shouldn't necessarily let people know where all our ships are. But
for Hollywood.
And anyway, I had to eventually go to my squadron boss and say, I might have got us involved in this filming thing with this ship that I said where it's at. And anyway, so it was kind of sanctioned after the event. But yeah, no, I just had a call from Jeff from Paramount Pictures. He said, can you help out with this ship that's going to be filmed on? So yeah, cut long story short, the film happened to be World War Z. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie and entire Hollywood descends on Falmouth because together we had ended up bringing Hollywood to Falmouth. And
beautiful part of the world as well.
Oh, yeah, lovely. I pitched up on the deck of the ship when all the production was there, and I kind of got handed a lanyard, and at some point I got handed a megaphone, and I just thought, I don't entirely know what's going on here. You know, I'm kind of involved in the sense that I've helped. I'm like a liaison, I guess, aviation.
An advisory.
Yeah, aviation liaison. But in the end, I got pulled to go and see the director. He told me what the scene was. I spoke to the director of photography there. And there's aircraft on the deck. There's hundreds of people walking around. And they were just like, so what's happening? So in the end, I helped basically get the megaphone out and start helping coordinate some of this
directing. I think
I directed the scene. I directed the whole scene.
Yeah.
No, I just got involved very much with this aircraft and this sort of virtual aircraft where they were going to land and who should go where and who would do what in terms of the deck crew. And so became a de facto aviation advisor on that. And there are some other scenes as well that I helped work on. But at that time, Andy and I had got together and seen that there were people on deck who were clearly not military, dressed as military, running around the deck, meant to be US Marines, and they looked terrible. Yeah. So Andy helped secure some mates of his, and they looked great. They did an awesome job, looking like they knew what they were doing because they did know what they're doing, some ex-Royal Marines. Then a few months later, we got a call from another assistant director who said, I'm working on this film, Tom Cruise film. You know, I've heard you guys do great things with the military personnel. And we're like, yeah, we do. That's us. And they asked for a lookbook of the sorts of guys that we might have. So Andy went to work pretty much taking pictures off Facebook of his mates, shoving them in a document, sending them off and saying, these are the sorts of guys that we can get. And the guys were just like, great, book them all. So then he had to go back and phone the guys and say, I might have got you involved in this film.
We've got a new operation, people.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we worked on a film called Edge of Tomorrow, supplying a bunch of guys who are in the exoskeleton kit on such a great movie. It's such a good film. And then shortly after that, realised there's a business in this. So registered the company, built a proper database, and soon we had 300 or 400 guys on the books, ex-military. And we've ended up working on, it's just scores of productions, big Hollywood films, including the Star Wars films.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a bit. What was working with Brad Pitt like? What's he like?
Professional. They're all professional. The actors that you see, and I've had the opportunity to work closely with a lot of the actors in terms of teaching them some aviation elements within cockpits and how they fly, because they're trying to make it the most realistic.
Absolutely.
For them as much as the audience. So people think that kind of advising is about how it looks on screen, but a lot of it is giving the actors an environment that they feel that they're doing something. So the lines mean something, and their actions are actually, when they're reaching to do something whilst they're delivering lines, there's a sense of purpose, and it comes across, especially with close-up scenes or where the camera's on them. You can tell when there's purpose in what they're doing. So the Brad Pitt it was very quick. There was very small scenes with them on it, but it is incredibly hard. again, we're talking pressure and responsibility that is on them. Can you imagine? You've got hundreds of people all around you, all knowing this scene is taking place.
Booked, times.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything's allotted.
Everything's set up, the set's been built and everything else. And then the cameras move in and the lights are set up all around a very small, intimate moment. And the close-up, the camera's right in their face and they've got to deliver the line that they know their face is going to be 20, 30 feet big on screen and somewhere. And little nuances that don't look right or that the line isn't delivered right, it just looks shite and it can be picked up. And so, just credit to them.
Right, we've kept people waiting for the headline bit here. No. So let's just build it up. There'll be some music coming onto this. You know what I mean? I'm sure Howie's going to mix this up properly and make a real dent in it. What was it like to fly the most iconic spaceship ever?
I'll have to rewind a touch.
Go.
So I had a phone call from an AD that we'd worked on another film, and he said, I'm going to need some air crew for background roles and possibly some ground crew. And I said, look, you've got to tell me the production because, to get actual air crew, the busy guys or ex-air crew, it's easy to muster a bunch of army blokes. The more specialised lot, it's hard to get hold of. And he said, OK, look, it's this new Star Wars film. It's the first of the new franchise ones. And it's going to be set around the time of A New Hope. So it's like a period piece because the 70s looks. And I was like, OK, am I allowed to tell them it's that? And he was like, absolutely not. So it's like, okay, this is going to be a hard sell to try and get people to a film that you can't tell them what it was. Anyway, around it, managed to get a whole bunch of guys involved. And and in the fitting, lots of them didn't know what it was. And one of them especially is a good mate of mine, Dave Thomas, he won't mind me saying it, shed a little tear as he came into the fitting room and saw like the X-Wing costumes all lined up. And they were treating it really carefully. They had legacy helmets. They had people who sort of lookalikes from the first New Hope film because they knew that it was going to segue into the just literally as Rogue One ends, it starts A New Hope. For those people that don't know, A New Hope was the first film released of the Star Wars stories, and it was Episode 4 where the Death Star gets blown up. The Battlestar plans or whatever are found in the beginning of this original film. They said, here are the plans. Princess Leia basically finds this or has these Death Star plans that help them blow up the Death Star. No one was ever told how these plans were found, and that's the kind of setting for Rogue One. So anyway, we're all in our kit, and we go into this hangar that's been made like Yavin
base.
Yeah, the base. You could look up 2 stories. The camera's never going to see it, and there's like dripping slime down from stone. It's like the set's just perfect and humongous, and there's also life-size X-Wing in there, and all the droids around, and it was just like unbelievable walking into this, your childhood, like instantly into the most iconic film. Well, for me, it was.
For everyone. And if it isn't, it should be.
And at that time, I understood that they were trying to get some other characters for the film. They initially said to a lot of the pilots, right, who's acted before? And I'd done some acting, stuck my hand up. Who's delivered lines in a feature film before? And at that point I hadn't, but I obviously kept my hand up because I was also one of the pilot backgrounds. So they said, look, you're a pilot, you've got to be in there too because we need as many pilots as we can get.
Yeah.
So anyway, there was about 4 of us and we got taken aside and we did some auditions in cockpits. But then we didn't know what would necessarily come of that. But I got asked to come back and do this kind of scene with Jyn Erso, who's the main...
She's the main character.
Yeah, terrific actress. And I was kind of in there, but kept on getting pushed. The AD was like, no, more in, like, closer, whatever, to be part of this scene. And I knew that it was going to be like a really iconic key scene. And I'd also had a long chat with this guy who basically is in charge of writing the story for the wider Star Wars universe. And I was aware that something was happening with this character being created, or me being part of this character, Harb Binli, who is one of the 2 pilots who in the first original film weren't named. So you had like Red 5 was Luke Skywalker, and there was... these other characters who
Red Squadron.
Yeah, so Red Squadron. Yeah. But there was 2 pilots in Red Squadron who hadn't been named. You hear them in the first film saying Red 7 checking in.
Mm-hmm. That was your call sign.
Yeah, Red 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't know, but what they were doing was making my character one of the original pilots in A New Hope. So anyway, the film's released. I knew that I'd be in it somehow. So we went to the sort of London main screening, in our dicky bows. And I invited some of the other Navy pilots there alongside it. And you don't know what's going to end up on the cutting room floor in films like that. But sure enough, that my character's like in there in this mega key scene. It's like, wow, they're really gone to town with this kind of thing, because he's definitely up there for quite a few shots of it. And then subsequently the book came out, which is like this visual guide to Rogue One, which is all the fans know that's the kind of story, that's the canon. Whatever's in there is part of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And that's when, like I saw the character's backstory and all this other stuff. And there's lots of sort of photos of Harb Binli, who's Red 7. And then there was like these kids' books that came out with Harb Binli in it, and sticker books and trading cards. And you then kind of got a sense that, okay, this character is important, even though it doesn't matter in the film. It could not exist in the film for a lot of the Star Wars fans, but to have the kind of names to the final people of Red Squadron who were in the original, they fly and shoot this Death Star down. That's what Harb Binli's character does and survives that.
A tenacious pilot.
Yeah, tenacious pilot. So yeah, he doesn't survive that. Unfortunately, we knew that they all died, bar 2 of them.
You've started at the back of this. It was the discussion with Jane, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then, there's this massive sort of illustrious set. You've got the depth, because there's no green screen. This is the real shit, man.
Exactly.
They built the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's a fully immersive set.
Yeah.
Well, it's a real. The thing is, it's a real universe to the mega fans.
Absolutely.
So that's the point. It's real.
Yeah.
It isn't fictional, it's real, because there's so much depth, so much layer, and that's why Harb Binli, Red 7, they had to fix this
gap. It was the gap. They need to name
it. We need this character, and it's you, mate.
Yeah, so it was kind of nuts. So afterwards, I've been to obviously a number of conventions where they queue up and you sign autographs and selfies and
like Comic-Con.
It is, So I've done those Comic-Cons and their sort of knowledge of the character and how they might fit in. And there are people who specifically have come to the Comic-Con and they queue up and they've come just to see you and your...
Because you're a bit of a rarity. But your character was in what was the original film, and then
exactly. That's why it's sort of rare, isn't it? Because this, I don't do anything. I'm in the film with Jin, and I'm part of that scene. And
you smouldered.
I smouldered. Yeah.
You smouldered.
I smouldered. We had to be really upset about the situation. It was a key situation here where we're either going to let the Empire reign and rule over us, or we're going to stand up and fight.
Revolution,
we're going to rebel. So we knew it was a key scene, and I didn't know how key the character would be until you've gone to this thing called Wikipedia. If you go onto Wikipedia, which is essentially naming every single character, reference,
moment,
weapon,
star, galaxy,
everything.
planet,
it's incredible,
sun.
And you put in like the Red Squadron list with Luke Skywalker and etc. And then you just see my characters in there with those guys from the original
and your pictures.
Oh, yeah. And it's just bizarre because to most people who aren't into Star Wars, it might not mean anything, might guess it means something. But to hundreds of thousands of people,
millions,
they just care so much about the story. But I love how they love it, and I love how they get lost in it.
Well, yeah, and we're talking about flying spaceships, and obviously how immersifying it was. What point does the green screen and AI take over? Or
so
did you actually fly them?
There's no. So we did actually sit in cockpits for the other bit when we were doing those kind of audition bits, because they were going to try and use them to map out how the actual fight scenes went. But none of it's green screen. There's a huge, like one of the biggest wraparound screens with cockpits on gimbals that would move around that could actually rotate. And so, no green screen stuff in there at all.
Do you think you're the man to call now when it comes to X-Wings and in the future?
Who knows? Hey, look, if they pick up the phone and ask, I should be there. No, to be honest with you, it was such a great experience. An odd thing to suddenly find yourself in, especially like this full circle bit of kind of slightly being inspired to fly by seeing X-Wing.
Exactly, yeah.
And then because of that, I ended up flying. And because I ended up flying, X-Wing on the film. I kind of did become an X-Wing pilot after watching. Anyway.
It's brilliant. It's a great tale. That's a great tale. And we've been able to share it on here.
Hey there, it's Howie. Just interrupting really briefly, I've got a quick favour to ask. We don't run ads on the Pod Barber, but if you're finding this podcast helpful, or if you know someone who might benefit from listening to it, please take just 10 seconds to share this episode by tapping on those 3 little dots on your podcast player. From there, you can text or email a link to the show and spread the word of what we're trying to do here. That'd be great. Mick and I really appreciate your help. Okay, back to the show.
A bit about the red carpet, mate, and you and your brother set up a company as well with...
That's right, Higgs. Yeah, so Higgs Crick is a sort of high-end lifestyle brand. We're actually very much specifically about crystal glassware and barware.
Beautiful stuff.
Which is lovely stuff. And we do some other pieces as well, like wall art pieces.
The periodic scale?
But yeah, the periodic table.
I love that piece.
Yeah, it's a limited edition thing that we ship all over the world. They're handmade pieces and they go all over the world. So some lovely stuff there. But we worked a lot on the Kingsman film. So the prop department wanted some chairs that we made that didn't turn out to be quite right for the aesthetic of the film, but they loved the glasses. And so they took the glasses and there's this decanter that's key to the Kingsman agents when they meet. Kingsman is an action adventure sort of spy movie. It's a bit like Bond. And anyway, whenever the Kingsman agents meet, they always kind of toast out of this decanter. And we made that specifically for the film, and we were our brand partners on the film as well. And this is totally different from my casting side of things. It's involvement in film in a different way. But we've worked with the director to create these key pieces that are used in the films, and likewise will be in the latest Kingsman, which is going to be released soon.
Great movies, really fun.
Yeah,
really
fun. Yeah, super fun. But really cool to work on those films as well. And also, we did a red carpet on that one, which was a lot of
taking the family. What's it like to be that side of the barriers and to be there with all the lights and everything?
It is pretty cool. You can't help but be sort of swept away with that side of things. It's great. I mean, it's funny having people take pictures of you just in case you're someone that they want to take pictures of. Obviously, when they go through the pictures afterwards and they're like, let's get rid of...
Unless they're Star Wars fans.
Unless they're Star Wars fans. And then they'd say, who the hell's that?
Red 7.
No, it's a great experience. And you need the glamour and the glitz and the glamour to sell films. Films are incredibly hard to make. They cost huge amounts of money to make. Marketing them is very, very difficult. In fact, I set up a company with Andrew Buckley again, where we did events for film launches, experiential events. So we'd get props from the films or stunt people from the films. The distributors would fly social media influencers in from around the world, and we would immerse them into a scene of the film. So for the Solo film, we branded an aircraft up with Solo stuff. It had cameras all around it. They got flown by a stunt pilot in the same maneuver that they do in the Solo film. They have to do this kind of maneuver to... And also I'd sit through this cockpit, the Millennium Falcon, about how to fly the Falcon, because I'd worked with Han and Chewie in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
So it's a well place to sort of teach them how to fly the Falcon. It's a bit of fun, but it's needed by the film.
It's a really cool bit of fun to be involved in.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you just are there, aren't you? Yeah, I'll start a business doing that. Yeah, I'll do that. You're on it, man. You've got loads of fingers in pies, but in a bit of Tinseltown, a little bit of casting, giving other people opportunities.
Oh yeah, that's been great. It's great to have put hundreds, thousands, in fact, of people onto films and to give them a little bit of joy, to give them some money also. There's lots who are just leaving the services who aren't really sure what they're going to do next, and they're looking at other options, and to give them work in film has been great because it's a great career. The British film industry is fantastic.
It's going to boom, isn't it? We've got Lord of the Rings coming, man. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, there's new studios being built and there's lots going on. If anyone is interesting, it's a career. It's a career for life, whether it be in producing and the finance side of things and insuring films, in acting as well, or technical side of things with sound and the camera departments. And
it's everything. Film and TV and production and content is everything.
Yeah.
It's a real life. It's a real job.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard work, but we've got some great technical expertise in this country. We've also got the tax breaks, which
make it affordable.
Help hugely. And so the government should undoubtedly continue to have those tax breaks in place. Otherwise, the industry will really suffer. There's lots of filming that goes on in Eastern Europe, which is why people often base themselves here. They'll shoot in the studios here. They'll go across to certain scenes in Eastern Europe and back again because they've got great facilities and personnel there as well. But it's a great industry to be in, albeit tough, hard to get into and tough. It's not, the shoot side isn't all glitz and glamour.
I think a lot of youngsters, they've got their TikTok account, they've got all these kind of things, and it's brilliant. They're practicing if you're getting confident in front of the camera.
Yeah.
But you've got to sort of get confident on a set, get confident distributing, listening to. It starts from conversation.
Yeah.
You've got to put yourself out there, and you can't just be a digital human being in this world that needs to operate on that sort of level. So taking some of the skillmanship from your social media interactions that you're having, you could really apply them, like you've applied your flight skills.
Yeah.
The fear over not having any mastery, but you mastered piloting to a degree that you've been able to recycle that.
The Navy, the Armed Forces are actually quite good at that, at giving you lots of transferable skills. But there's lots of creative people that work in the Armed Forces. You just sort of might be pigeonholed. My really good friend, Henry Davis, is a terrific director. He's an ex-pilot, and he's now producing animated series for kids, which is going to do incredibly well. There's creative people that are working who have come from fields that might not seem creative fields, but the industry isn't limited to just like, oh, I'm a creative person. In the production side of things, I was lucky enough to work, and I want to plug a great production team, Submotion, who make film content and commercials, etc. Richard Prendergast is director, and Rachel, his wife, who's a producer, and we produced together a film. So it's just about working on films and film sets and pulling together people from different backgrounds is what we had to do to make this short film called Sylvia, which did very well a couple of years ago. We were lucky to get on the BAFTA long list, and also we qualified for the Oscars as well, which is fantastic. But working on a set like that, you can have a team of people who are kind of getting to sample what it's like to work on a film set, don't necessarily have to have huge amounts of experience. They can experience independent film production and just say, man, I want to get involved in this. And then you can build up your skill set and you can just start being a camera's assistant and work your way up. What I was trying to say was I'd encourage people to look at independent film productions that are being made. Short films or feature films, it doesn't really matter, but get yourself involved, get yourself on set and see what you think of it.
So Sylvia, just to give us I picked up on that name. Where can we watch that if we want to watch it?
Just Google it, actually. If you can get to it just via YouTube, just by Googling Sylvia short film. It's a true story in America about this woman who had... I don't want to spoil the story.
I'll tell you what we'll do. Send me the link and we'll put it on the show notes.
Excellent. It's a heart-wrenching story. It's incredible. Richard and Rachel did a bang-up job. So I had a small part in the film as well, but I was executive producer on that. So Andy and I were executive producer on that piece, and we'd love to continue that beyond in the future. But unfortunately, I'm so busy and fully sort of immersed in my current role at IdeaSpace that that'll get pushed.
I do want to talk about that as well, and also want to talk about the word pigeonholed, how people are not having enough opportunity to experience everything in life, and they're getting pigeonholed, and it's an emotional drain tie. It's a working career drain tie. What would you say about it?
Yeah, I struggle a lot. I see it, and I've got 2 young daughters, but it's really easy to see them, especially even now, just start to feel like they can't do something because, well, that's other people do that sort of thing, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And we lose a lot of great minds through biases that just steer people in one direction just automatically. People get pigeonholed, and it doesn't mean you can't do something. It just means that there might be a slightly different way that you'll get there. But I think when we pigeonhole early on, I think it's really dangerous. I think we lose talented creatives, academics, sports people. They feel pigeonholed, and externally we might pigeonhole them. I think we need to instill this self-belief and confidence if we can. Not that you can do anything, because I think that's false hope and false promise to people. Just like you can be anything is equally as dangerous. You
can be the best version of yourself.
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
have a go.
Yeah, totally. Or you might be able to do things that you didn't think you could do. Opportunity, obviously, you need to give people opportunity. They need to be put in a position where when I say they, I'm talking, I guess, about youth and children specifically. We need to give as much opportunity as we can to people so that our schools are equipped to be able to give people sporting opportunities or the arts or, and there'll be people saying, well, my school doesn't have that. And that's a problem. We need to make sure that there are the facilities there so that people can explore lots of different avenues and have a chance to express themselves creatively.
So basically, it's about academic functional fitness in life. That means everything. Have a go at everything. See what suits.
Yeah, experience is key. I've been involved in a few different companies, and I have made a pledge to myself that I was going to try and cram in as many lifetimes as I could do into mine. Space
travel helps that, my friend.
Space travel has helped that greatly. I think it's seizing opportunities when they're there and trying to put yourself in a position where there are more opportunities. Fortune and luck plays a massive part in it. But we need to try and create as many opportunities for the youth and our children as possible, but also get people in a mindset that they're ready to take it.
The key thing is the need for us now to recognise that we must encourage the understanding of mindset, and we must be training this in our young children at certain ages, because without wiring that very neuroplasticity that we all have, without putting the right wires to the right part of the brain, straight away we've diverted from the opportunity of using all of that dark matter. So if we can get that in our children at a young age, that's what builds the self-esteem, so that they come and the reflection of themselves is of a person that can take those risks, is a person that can do that. For me, fundamentally what the problem is, the generation of people parenting this next generation of people that are worried about how are we going to build their self-esteem, is because those people are lacking that, because we've inherited now through generations. I'll always say, if it doesn't heal, it repeats. So it's about time, get the plaster off, let it heal properly, recognise it. And the more conversations like this, the more times people can listen to, we're both parents, both different fields, but both with exactly the same principal idea. It's about self-esteem. It's about having the experience. It's about letting someone fall over, trip up. Yeah, rub a bit of Savlon on it. Yeah, talk about it, but don't fuss over it and frighten somebody into one pathway. Allow them to be scared.
Yeah.
Scared is good. We've obviously talked about, the importance of chasing failures, because that's where the success comes.
Yeah.
You've been able to adapt your career. You've gone from flying naval helicopters. You've gone from that community on the little island floating in the middle of the sea. You've then gone into Hollywood. You've resurfaced using different skill sets. You're the epitome of adapting in my eye, flying the most iconic spaceship. Just one more mention to that. That's bloody amazing, isn't it? X-Wing fighter pilot. Everyone who's listened to this at this point will be going, whoa, you did it. You took down a Death Star, mate. You're now working in a Cambridge incubator firm, potentially helping seed companies, startups, entrepreneurs find the solutions on the bigger scale to the problem that we really are sitting here with, which is the decline, mass extinction of humanity. We've got the world is suffering, people, and without humans, less suffering, the world will continue to suffer. So that's why I'm doing this podcast, is to raise awareness that we must look after each other, heal each other. Tell me a bit about Cambridge Incubators, man.
Gosh, so the Cambridge scene, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, if that's what you want to call it, is set up to allow enterprises of all shapes and sizes in all different industries and sectors to flourish and grow from ideas, from the germ of an idea, which could be coming out of the university in terms of like a spin out. So you could have a research group that's coming up with some postdocs, PhD students working on some research. It might be gene therapy, or it might be a manufacturing process. And they've managed to find a way to manufacture more efficiency with less waste. It might seem like it's to someone else boring research.
Yeah,
it's
really
to do with
trivial, but
to do with how metal is pressed in a press to make car molds or to make widgets or machine parts or whatever it might be. As I said, all the way to life sciences or something. And it's really hard to commercialize ideas, because obviously, if it can't be commercialised, it's very difficult for that to still get funded, for the research to get funded, and also for us to benefit from what they've found. So you have to have a commercially viable solution to a problem that's out there. And that's where incubators can help grow. So we have 3 offices around Cambridge and the facilities to work in a space with other startups. And we can also put on events for them so that they can learn from alumni. We're a membership organisation. IdeaSpace has got essentially members who pay to be a part of IdeaSpace to access the network of people that we know, and mostly to share knowledge, experience, expertise with each other. So it might be as simple as a startup says, I need a good IP lawyer, to protect this patent.
Intellectual
or
property.
idea. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Yeah, intellectual property. And someone else can say, hey, look, we use them for this and it worked out, or don't do this, or, these are the pitfalls on that side of things. And they help each other really as much as we might help them. And then when they grow, they might form a company, have 2 or 3 co-founders. They might start bringing a team together. raise some seed funding or pre-seed funding, reach the point where they grow too big for us and our organisation, in which case they will then move on to some of the other organisations that are in and around Cambridge, so that when they're wanting to raise 10 million or up to 100 million, Series A and Series B rounds can be in the hundreds of millions that people are raising to take a possible cure for cancer out to the population. But yeah, so I took over as head of IdeaSpace a year ago in a very difficult situation, obviously, with a community of founders you can't have a community physically if you've got a pandemic on. So it was really hard to maintain us through that period. But yeah, membership is growing back again, and we're really excited to take on more startups. Yeah.
So if you're a germ like I am with plenty of ideas, can we just come knocking on the door? How do we get in?
You could. Yeah, that's a very good point. You could knock on the door, and we would hear exactly what your idea is, where you're at with it, help steer you in the right direction, so that it might be not formed enough. You might need help and support from mentors or that sort of thing. It might be that there's another organisation in that ecosystem, because this isn't all about, by the way, I should say, this isn't all about just university spin-outs. Of IdeaSpace, there's probably 60% currently that are out of the university, and 40%, and that percentage will vary year in and year
depending
out.
on who's got what idea and
exactly.
who's coming to you.
But it's certainly not just the preserve of university spin-outs. This is local.
So this is going back to the inclusivity and making sure that we're not. So with your attitude and your mindset, you're basically sitting there and saying there's a lot of people out there that have got a potential, and they can magnify what's inside their mind. And there might be opportunities. There also might be, you just need to know that idea is not the right idea, and it helps that person then move on.
Yeah. And also, like I said right back at the beginning about this kind of crew room environment in flying and aviation, where if a mistake has been made, the most valuable thing you can possibly do is share everything about that failure that you possibly can do, to allow the next pilot to not make the same mistake, or to let the engineers know exactly what the problem might be, so that if anyone else in that situation ever arises again, that small vibration through the cyclic or the controls, you recognise that. Matey boy had that a couple of months ago. I think I know what the problem might be. And in the same way that enterprises, you need to sit around and hear people's failures and so you don't make it again, and you can kind of remove those failures from your own journey, but also because you let people know that they're not the only ones failing.
Yeah.
That's equally important, is that when you have someone who is working on an idea and they're like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I've never done an entrepreneurial stuff. I'm an academic, or I've worked at the corporate,
the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. When you hear people who have failed and carried on going, you recognise that everyone is failing constantly. The most successful people, they've got up that one more time after that failure. That's it. They haven't not failed. They've failed constantly through their life. There is not a single person alive that isn't failing at something. And to be able to share that openly is really important. And we try and foster that at IdeaSpace. We get alumni coming back who have had IPOs on their companies. They've sold, been acquired, or the company's still outgrowing, and they'll come back and they'll talk to the current members about their journey. And it's invaluable, really.
It sounds like another great space that you're working in.
It is, yeah.
There you go, double-ended.
Yeah.
We've got one question we always ask, which is sex, drugs and rock and roll. What's it to you?
I can't. I'm just going to be so boring.
And talk about sex?
No.
Whilst playing rock and roll after a night on the drugs.
Exactly. That's exactly it. No, it's like you need to experience. So sex, drugs and rock and roll is like experiencing the extremes of what you can and you're, at whatever time is right for you. It's often when you're youth and you have abandon and you're less likely to care about risk. You need to experience life. That's what it is. Sex, drugs and rock and roll is experiencing life. It's pushing boundaries for yourself. And that's kind of what we've been talking about today anyway. Sex, drugs and rock and roll is life that's easily lost through the mundanity of our existence. You need to get rid of the mundanity of our existence to live that life.
Indulge in all. We know how to follow you as a Star Wars character. Disney shout out. Watch all the movies back to back is recommended, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? That's a whole weekend these days. But when people are trying to follow you on your social media or with the incubator, how would they get hold of you? How do people, get involved?
If someone has got an idea that's a little more formed, so that there's an idea of where it might go commercially or how it might be picked up, how they could work with industry, if they've maybe got a team, so that, and when I say a team, they haven't fully formed a team, but if there's a co-founder already there, so that you can start to see that there's a team aspect behind it. Because the difficult thing is that everyone has ideas, and they've got the best ideas. They've got ideas that are absolutely valid and have potential. But because there are so many of those, they're not all going to make it through the difficult filters that are there. And so you need to know that there's more behind just the idea. There's someone who is going to be able to see it through. Because what people want is say, I've got a great idea, and someone else to do all the hard work for them to get that idea to fruition. And that's the hard thing, is that most of our companies, it's about getting the right team for them, and then actually that founder or that person with the idea has to drive it through as far as they can. And at some point they'll bring a CEO in if they're not going to be a CEO themselves. But mostly, you have to have the ability to be able to see that idea through, because people don't just say, oh, that's a brilliant idea. Well, I'll give you a percentage and I'll do all the bloody hard work for you. And you'll be well rewarded for your amazing idea, because everyone has ideas.
So to engage, how do they engage with you if they've got like a little proof of concept, a bit of a team around them?
Just Google IdeaSpace Cambridge,
okay,
and pick up the phone. I'm on LinkedIn under, I think, Benjamin Hartley, so you can just find me on
Benjamin
LinkedIn.
Hartley.
We're jamming.
Yeah.
I don't really do social media. I did some
no Star Wars Harb Binli.
Well, there's some stuff on Instagram that I'd posted some Star Warsy type bits.
Just for the super geeks out there?
Yeah, for the super geeks out there. I don't often use it, but I guess if you wanted to see some...
I suppose what you could do is you could put, some of our social media on that post and get loads of Star Wars listeners.
We should do that. We should absolutely do that. So so in that case, I will say on Instagram, there will be some post about that. You can find me on LinkedIn, just obviously because it helps with the business world and where I'm at the moment. And just Google IdeaSpace. If you're an entity who's got some germs of a startup and you're looking for a place to work and a community to be a part of. Yeah.
Excellent. And what about ex-military personnel? Are we, now the world has reopened, we've got all these film sets coming in, are we talking about the company?
Yeah. Those that are interested can look at MFS casting.
For ex-military or police
you're
any
right,
service people, ambulance drivers.
Yeah, it started out as very much military, ex-military, because that's where we were, but it's morphed into kind of any action roles, basically. So, if anyone's a martial artist or a sports person or whatever.
Or a double amputee or anything who's got military skillmanship, it's an inclusive platform.
Yeah, they can take a look online.
Just one last question, because it is hard to get you, and rightly so, because you're such a busy man, but what made you come on this show?
Well, obviously the charismatic draw of the host, mainly. No, because it's doing the right thing. It's encouraging conversation. It's encouraging openness. It's getting people to talk and ramble often. There's lots of rambling.
Howie will make you sound great.
And Howie is a incredibly experienced producer, makes it sound amazing. And that helps. When you listen to podcasts, when it sounds great, you totally engage with it. So that helps hugely. No, I think the team that you have is amazing, and I think the content and the guests you have are incredibly interesting. So yeah, that's why.
Cool, man. I was super excited to hang out with you, and we've got to do that. We've talked about Star Wars. We talked about loads of stuff. We've covered such a lot of topics. Could go on for ages and ages. And to listen to somebody like you is so provoking. And I just hope that will then provoke a poke out to our audience, which is ever growing, to build that self-esteem in themselves and those young ones around them, so that they've got that ability to dive out into the world and maybe land on your shin and hurt yourself and get up and have another go.
Yep.
So on the note of you coming in, very grateful for you to be in here, my man. I like to finish with peace, love and power to your day.
Thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for looking after me so well as well.
Nice breakfast.
It was a really good breakfast, actually. You did good breakfast. Cheers. Thank you so much.
The Pod Barber is a That Media and Design production, with Mickey at the mic and Howie at the controls. If you've been affected by any of the topics in this show, you can find more helpful information on the episode's page at thepodbarber.com and search The Pod Barber on social and let's get connected.